Hi guys! So we're here in the kitchen and today I'm going to be showing you how to adapt my recipe for lemon squares into a foraged one. So the first thing we're going to do is make our pastry and then we're going to make our filling, and I will be using some sumac, and I showed you guys how to process this yesterday. We're also going to be using some sweet fern and some sassafras. Oh, I guess we could use some sassafras. You know, this is actually saffron. Ooh. But sassafras would be really good, especially the leaves in this, because they have kind of a lemony flavor. So I'm going to grab those out of the drawer, and then we're going to come right back and we're going to make the pastry. Okay, so we've got our butter in the bowl, and this is the other half of the stick of butter. So this is 120 grams approximately. We're going to be putting in 240 grams of flour. We're also going to be putting in some sweet fern. This is the last of a previous year's batch of sweet fern, and so I'm trying to use all of this up. So I'm finishing this off today. I also just mentioned sassafras for some bizarre reason, which I wasn't going to put in here, but I think it would be really nice, and it might make the pastry look a little green, which could be fun as well, as we're kind of preparing for spring. So I'm going to crumble these leaves up a little bit, and they have a really nice lemony taste. I know that in Cajun cooking these are still used as a spice called filet, but I've never seen them used in pastry before, so this will be kind of an exciting thing for us all to experience together. I also need a pinch of salt for this. This is nice coarse rock salt. And then last, we're going to add in our water. And so we're going to do about 60 grams of water. There we go. Okay, so remove from the scale. Get your hand in there and squeeze it together. So this is short crust pastry, which is what I like best for my lemon squares. Some people like biscuit, which you can certainly do if you have a nice biscuit recipe. But pie crust is one of my favorite things to make because you get your hands right in there and you can squeeze the butter and the flour. It's a good workout for your hands. And it's nice to get, you know, tactilely involved with your food. Pastry is something that I bet a lot of people used to make a couple hundred years ago themselves at home, and it's something we really don't make very much ourselves anymore, which I think is a shame, because not only is it very few ingredients, but it's really easy to do, and I find it to be quite a meditative process as well. When I'm not filming, usually I put one of my favorite TV shows on and I hang out with some characters that I really like and just kind of sit here and rub the butter into the pastry. And so that's kind of what I'm doing right now. And as I suspected, these herbs have turned our dough a nice spring green color. And what could be better than some spring green ready for our dough to go and rest in the refrigerator. And then we are going to make our filling. Nice. So it's ready, and the proportions are right when you can clean most of it off of your hands and you have just kind of a residue of butter left instead of flour. And so we are now making the filling, and the filling begins by zesting about 4 lemons. And so I don't have a zester, but I have a nice sharp paring knife. And so what I'm doing right now is cutting the rind off the outside of the lemon, trying to leave as little white pith on the inside of this rind as I can. And so that's not too bad. You can see the little holes here, so it's just a little bit of white on the yellow zest, and the yellow part is where the essential oils and all the flavor are, so that's why we're putting it this way, whereas the pith is pretty much just bitter, which is kind of nice as well, but we're not going to be using that for our pastry today. And so I've done about 3. This is the third one. And then we're going to chop this zest with some sugar. And the reason we're doing that is because the sugar will absorb more of the flavor from the skin, the oils and such, than the cutting board will. And so that way we don't lose any of the flavor from the zest, despite the fact that we don't have a zester. This was a trick that I saw Julia Child doing in one of her cooking shows, and I thought it was really clever, because even when I had a zester when I was living at my folks', I really hated using it because I was always afraid I was going to cut my fingers off or skin my knuckles really bad. I feel a lot more comfortable with my paring knife, and so this allows me to zest my citrus in a way that is safer and more comfortable for me. So now that this is here, we're going to set that aside for a minute. I'm going to cut my lemons in half, just give them a quick roll. And the reason we're rolling them is because it loosens the juice inside and it makes them easier to juice. So you see, I just cut it and it's already leaking out all over my hand. Now, something else that I would really love that I don't have is a citrus reamer, which is one of those things that you stick in the half of a lemon like this and you kind of go like this, and then it releases all the juice. But if you, like me, do not have one, I would encourage you just to turn it inside out and kind of mush it around in your hands until you have basically this dehydrated citrus carcass left in your hand, and you will get most of the juice out that way. All right, so I'm gonna juice the remaining lemons and then we will be right back. So we finished juicing our lemons and now we are gonna chop our citrus rind. And so I'm gonna take 2 tablespoons of sugar and then a nice sharp knife. And we're gonna just chop So now that may seem like the pieces are still a little large, but that's okay because I'm going to use my immersion blender to get these nice and small. There were some bits of the lemon that were still kind of in large pieces like this where there's still some juice in here. And so I thought to myself, you know, you have the immersion blender, you may as well use it. So that's what we're going to do right now. right, so now that is nice and smooth, and we can continue on making the rest of our filling. So we're going to put this back on the scale, zero it out, and we're going to put in about 180 grams of sugar because we put in 2 tablespoons already, and the original recipe for this calls for 3 cups of sugar, which I think is too much because I like my lemon squares kind of sour, and if they're too sweet, then I don't think it's a proper lemon dessert. And so to make sure that it's nice and tart, I'm going to take some of this dried pomelo rind, which I also made, and we're going to do a little teaspoon of that. We're also going to take some saffron, which I got from a friend of mine, and I'm trying to incorporate it more into cooking since I have it. We're going to take a pinch, let's see, that's 4, 5, 6, 7, oh, lucky 7, threads of saffron. We're then going to take about a teaspoon of mastic, which is a Middle Eastern spice made from the pits of cherries, all ground up. And we're going to blend this again to get the saffron and other spices incorporated nicely. Okay. So what I forgot to put in was a teaspoon of ground cardamom, and even though we're not using a ton of sugar, this is going to add a nice kind of sweet floral flavor, and it's a way to sweeten these without adding any extra sugar. Oh yeah, that was better. Okay, so to our sugar, spices, and lemons, we're gonna add our eggs. And we want 6 large eggs. And these can go right in. And we're going to use our immersion blender again, since it's already dirty. And then last, we add the flour. And so this is going to help this to set. And so I'm going to be using 120 grams or 1 cup. And so now I'm going to use this spatula to just mix the flour in to our mixture here. just kind of squash the lumps against the side of the bowl, and they'll disappear for you. All right, so I'm gonna finish mixing this, and then we're gonna roll out our pastry. Okay, so we're now gonna roll out our pastry, and I like to roll my pastry out just with flour because I don't think it sticks to the pan when it's done nearly as much. And so I'm just gonna take a good handful of flour. It may look like too much, but remember, this is gonna get rolled out nice and thin. And so the flour will spread across the surface as well. And we're rolling this out to fit this 9x13 sheet pan. And so we're gonna try and keep it in its rectangular shape. And every time we turn it over, you're just gonna rub the flour so that the whole surface looks nice and white. Rub it again. And we're going to turn it this way because we want it longer. Anytime you see the green coming through or the pastry coming through, this is green because there are green herbs in it, and that actually is making this a little easier to see. You want to make sure you're covering it back up with flour, and that's going to keep it not only from sticking to the counter, but also cool. So part of the problem with making short crust pastry like this is people find that it gets melted or it gets sticky. And a little extra flour with this goes a long, long way. And it will not only keep it from getting sticky, but it helps keep it cool because the flour is sort of insulating the dough from the heat of your hands. Looks like we could do just a little more. Okay. So let me grab the bench scraper, because even though we floured this well, it still manages to stick sometimes. And so if you can just kind of roll it over the top of your rolling pin gently, just move your pan, pick it up, and roll it back. And if you get a little hole, that's okay. Short crust is very forgiving. It'll stick itself back together, no problem. And you're just tucking it into the corners, nice and gentle. You want to patch these holes because the lemon filling is a little thin, and if you don't, it can leak out of the crust onto the sheet and it'll get stuck and burn. We don't want that. And so we're just going to roll over our crust, kind of sticking it a little bit to the edge of the pan. We want a nice high lip here. And I think these kind of look better if they're a little more rustic looking without like too much of a crimp, because the pastry is going to be different all the way around the pan. And I'm actually going to pinch a little bit off here, stick it over here. These always remind me of bake sales from school. I always had lemon squares. I don't know why, but it was something I guess people really enjoyed making, and they're pretty simple to make at home. And I'm going to be showing you how to make these in a toaster oven today, so even in the summertime, if you're looking for a nice lemon square, you can do it without having to turn on the big oven and make your house or apartment all hot. Okay, so I'm going to patch this one last corner, clean up this edge a little bit, and then we are going to pre-bake this at 350 for 15 to 20 minutes until it's nice and browned, but only lightly. Don't forget, you want to prick gently with a fork, and this will release steam and prevent more holes and bubbles from forming. And so I'm going to stick this in the toaster oven, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. So our pastry is almost ready to come out of the oven right now. I think I have, no time left at all, which is good. So now we're going to get this out of the oven, and it melted a little bit. That's okay. This doesn't have to be perfect. I should have stuck it up on the edges a little bit more. But what we're gonna do is we're just gonna carry on with this anyway. And hopefully it still comes out all right. Gonna get a little burnt, a little stuck, but you know what? That's the nice thing about homemade baking is sometimes it looks a little homemade. So last, I'm gonna sprinkle over some sumac. Now, yesterday, you guys watched me process this year's sumac into this jar, and because this has kind of a nice sour taste the way lemons do, we're going to be using this on to decorate the top. And now it's going back in the oven. I'm just going to grab another oven mitt. And hopefully this doesn't turn into a mess. Okay, so we're gonna check on that in 30 minutes and see what comes out. Okay, so our lemon squares are just about ready to come out of the oven. And we know they're ready because when I feel the middle, I get just a nice gentle spring and there's no fingerprint left in any part of this, and the edges have started to turn a nice brown color. And so we're gonna pull this out. And leave it on a rack until it's nice and cool, and then we can cut it. Okay, so we have waited several hours until our pan is nice and cool to the touch completely. And that's really important because otherwise these will stick to the bottom. And so if you look, you're gonna see that we didn't need to grease. We didn't need to line this sheet at all. Our tray bake came out nice and easy. And now we are going to cut this and give it a taste. So I know these are called lemon squares, but there's just something about cutting them into triangles that makes me very happy. And so I usually cut these into triangles. Now, I know they're called lemon squares, but there's something I think a little more exciting and satisfying about eating them when they're triangles. And so you can cut them into triangles as you go along, or cut them into squares and then cut them in half. Whatever you want to do, you can leave them as squares too. There's nothing wrong with that either. I think maybe part of the reason I like them as triangles so much is it's a smaller bite. And these remind me of some of the cookies that my mom used to make for me growing up. And she always liked small cookies. Something that would fit, like barely in this little area in your hand. You have a little one bite right first thing in the morning and it would jumpstart her day. She was not a coffee drinker, so she had her sugar in the morning, and These like tiny triangles, I think, are reminiscent of that. And you know, you can even cut them smaller if you want to make them like really cute or something. And cut them again like that, or cut them again like that. And now you have like a nice tiny, almost little pedophore of lemon square. And so I'm going to stop cutting these so that we can taste them and see if I did a good job. Wow. Oh. Ooh. The lemon really kicks you in the back of your teeth. You know, when something is nice and sour and sharp, and you haven't eaten all day, and it's just like, that's exactly what I'm getting from the lemon. I'm getting a little bit of the warmth from the cardamom and some of the brightness from the sumac. And I actually can taste the sassafras in the crust as well, which is really exciting because I've never done this before. And so this is a new pastry for me with the sassafras in it. And it's something I'll definitely be repeating again. And I would encourage you to pick some sassafras leaves and dry them in the upcoming year for use in your baking projects, along with the sumac. And you can make your own foraged lemon squares at home. Happy foraging.